Did you know that you are at your most valuable when you are in your zone of genius? But what can happen when we're in business is that we're wearing all of the hats and we're doing all of the things, which is actually slowing our progress down. So as we start to grow and scale our business, one of the most important tasks that you can do is get super clear on what your zone of genius is, and then learn to actually set really clear boundaries and have set up your day, your schedule, your plan for your business to be able to keep yourself in your zone of genius 80% of the time. This is not about being in your zone of genius 100% of the time. It's about being in it 80% of the time, because we know that life is going to happen, business is going to happen. You're going to have to step back in and do certain things, and that's totally okay. So it's about actually exploring and understanding what your zone of genius is and where you're at your most valuable. When you spend majority of your time in your zone of genius, your business is going to grow and expand at a greater capacity that's going to support you in growing your business to a whole new level. So let's start with, what is your zone of genius? Do you even know what your zone of genius is? And if you don't, it's time to actually explore it. So we're going to cover the 4 zones so then you can get super clear on what your zone of genius is. Now, your zone of genius, now the way that I like to think about it is, you know when you're in your zone of genius because you're in absolute flow, you're in the zone, you feel like you almost lose time and you love it, right? Like it lights your soul on fire. It brings you so much joy. It's so much fun for you to do. It's so easy for you to do. It's like natural. It's your natural talents that come to shine through. So when we're in that, what can happen is that we actually talk ourselves out of it by saying that, oh, hang on a minute, are people really going to pay me to be in my zone of genius? Yes, they are. They absolutely are. And it's about how you structure your business to make sure that you're staying in your zone of genius, because that's where you are your most valuable. And it's then to do that, we actually need to learn how to delegate all the other crap. So then you're actually not in your zone of genius. You need to find people who are in their zones of genius to do all the other stuff that is in your zone of incompetence or in zone of excellence. So let's explore this. Okay, we're going to go right down to the bottom. We're going to explore firstly, what is your zone of incompetence? Now, I want you to make a list. What are some of the things that you are terrible at doing? You're just not good at doing them, right? You could probably get them done, but you're terrible at them. It's not going to be a good job, right? So think about all the tasks that you do in your business and your life, and know that whatever you write here, it's totally okay. That you don't have to make any decisions right now, but I want you to get it out of your head and onto paper. So write down all the things that you're terrible at doing. I know that I'm terrible writing code for a website. I wouldn't know how to do it. No clue at all how to do it. I would suck at it, right? Complete incompetence. Another maybe zone of incompetence, to give a better example as well, could be that I don't know how to service a car, right? Not at all in my zone of genius, not at all even in my zone of competence, right? It's completely incompetent for me to spend my time doing that. So I want to put that down there in the zone of incompetence, right? All the things that you're terrible at. So pause the video and then go and write your list. Okay, now let's explore your zone of competence. Now, your zone of competence are things that you can actually do. Like you could get the job done, but no better than anybody else, right? So I want you to really consider those things, because sometimes we go, oh, I should just do them. It's quicker for me to do these things. But really, it's things that maybe you could get someone else to do that would be much better and much more beneficial for you to be in your zone of genius a lot more of the time and give those tasks to somebody else. Now, for me, these would be like website updates. I can do them, but I couldn't do it any better than anybody else, right? It could be posting something to social media. I know how to do it. I can get it done. Now, creating it, that might be more of my zone of excellence, because it's important that I'm actually sharing my message. But posting it, anybody else could do that, right? So what are some of the things that you can put on that list there of your zone of competence, the things that you can do, but maybe it's not really something that you really should be doing, right? So pause the video now and write a list of those things. Okay, now let's explore your zone of excellence. So sometimes we can get a little bit confused between our zone of excellence and zone of genius. And I want to clarify this for you. Your zone of excellence is most likely things that you've actually been paid to do in the past. Okay, now there's a difference between things that you can do and the things that you want to do that light you up, that you just absolutely love doing. Okay, so I want you to write down in your zone of excellence, what are some of the things that you're actually pretty okay at doing? And often people will say to you, oh, you're really good at that. And then you have an internal response that is like, yeah, I can do it, but right? So it's things that you're actually good at compared to, say, other people. There might be other people out in the world that are terrible at it, that you're actually pretty good at it. but it's not something that truly brings you joy. It's not something that lights you up. It's not something that just sets your soul on fire. You can do it, but it's like, okay. So I want you to pause the video and write down all of those things that you're doing in your business currently that you know that you can do and you do pretty well, but maybe it's not something that you just love doing. Okay, now as we explore your zone of genius, I want you to think about the things that just light you up, that bring you joy, that you just lose time, that when you're in the flow, you're in the zone of it, you literally lose time doing it. I want you to write down all of those key things. Now, there might be only a couple, and maybe it's even from a place of like, well, I'm actually very good at this. Like, I feel like I'm actually an expert in this, that if I was to go and teach somebody else to even do it, I'd be really good at that too, right? So that's where your zone of genius is. So I want you to write down all of those pieces. There might only be a couple, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And I want you to write that down because that's where you are your most valuable. Okay, so pause the video, go and do that, and then come back to me. So now that we know this, what do we do about it? Remember, we want to get back to being 80% of our time in our zone of genius. Now, this is going to be different for different stages of business, okay? So for some times we need to consider that obviously we may not be able to delegate or outsource things based on income right now, and that's okay. I'm not telling you to go and do that. I want you to have your own discernment here and choose when is the right time to do that and start to look at how can I work towards delegating and outsourcing some of these tasks to keep myself in my zone of genius more. And then we want to actually look at our schedule and go, okay, where am I in my zone of genius? Where am I actually not in my zone of genius? And I want to give you another tool for that in just a minute. So first, what we want to do is start with your zone of genius. And I want you to ask yourself, how can I spend more of my time here? So stop the video and answer that question. Then with your zone of excellence, how can I reduce some of my time here? What do I need to do here in order for me to be able to reduce the amount of time that I spend in my zone of excellence? And the last two, it's about delegating and outsourcing. So how can I get rid of some of these tasks? How can I automate some of these tasks? Honestly, sometimes our automation piece, we haven't actually spent the time doing, and we're spending way too much time in our zone of competence, way too much time. So how can you outsource, delegate, or automate? And then with your zones of incompetence, it's time to get rid of that off your to-do list altogether. It is a waste of your time being in that area, right? So we want to actually get rid of that completely. So how can we delegate it, get rid of it right now? And so some of this actually, what might come into play here is some of your life tasks that need to happen, right? So when I've explored this with clients before, they were like, well, I'm actually terrible at laundry and I hate doing it. It wastes so much of my time. It takes me out of my zone of genius. And I know that if I was actually to delegate that and get rid of it, I would be able to spend so much more time in my zone of genius and bring more money in for the family, more money in for the business, and to be able to then outsource even more. So what if we just did a bit of a laundry service once or twice a week that's going to support the growth of my business to be me more in my zone of genius, right? So sometimes it's life tasks. So I want you to consider those things. One other thing to consider here is how much energy and effort goes into doing those things in your list of incompetence and competence, right? A lot of those take a lot more of your energy, brain power, conscious thought in order to get those things done. So what I want you to consider is how you're actually mapping out your day. Because if you are actually allocating time in your day to spend time doing those menial tasks, those tasks that are your incompetence and zone of incompetence, then you are wasting some of your energy doing those things if you're allocating that in the area of your day where you're most switched on, right? So everyone has a different circadian rhythm and the way that our brain power works throughout the day. So some people are switched on and wired right from the beginning of the day, right? They're much more able to think really clearly at that time, problem solve, come up with ideas, all of that in the beginning of the day. Other people, it's the middle of the day, and other people, it's the afternoon, others are the evening. So I want you to consider what's your time of day where you're most switched on, you're most creative, most able to problem solve. Your brain is literally your superpower, right, at that time. So I want you to start to allocate some of your zone of genius time during that time, right? And then use the other time throughout the day to use less of your energy and effort to do some of those tasks that are less important, right? Don't give the dregs and the last little pieces of your energy to your zone of genius. It's not supporting the growth and it's not helping you thrive and be in the most abundant energy. So I want you to look at your day and how you're scheduling it and think about how you can allocate your zones of genius in those times where you're at your best and then set aside those tasks that if you have to do them, if you can't outsource them just yet, just set them up in the day where it's going to take you less energy or less focus, and you can allocate those to the times where you're not at your best, right? Because it's not worth you giving it your energy, if that makes sense. Now, I want you to notice as you're going through this, if there's any negative self-talk, if there's any doubt, and I want you to start to actually just bring awareness to that and just ask yourself, is that even true? So often when I go through this process, we look at the zone of excellence and go, oh, I'm not really sure that people are going to pay me for my zone of genius. So I'm just going to stay here in my zone of excellence. Absolutely a self-doubt, fear coming into play right there. And I want you to challenge it. I want you to challenge it and just play it out and see how it goes, right? So spend a little bit more time in your zone of genius, outsource and get rid of some of that zone of excellence and see how that starts to impact your business. So you may want to look at this over a month to 3 month period to see the impact that it actually has, and then see how you go, because often it's just our belief. It's just our belief because we've got evidence from the past to prove that we've been paid for these things in the past. So we have that hesitation to really step into our zone of genius, but that's where you're most valuable. I was talking about this with a client the other day, and her zone of genius is honestly ideas and big picture, big sky thinking. And what was happening is that she was spending so much of her time in operational things, in detail orientated tasks, that it was taking her out of her zone of genius, which was slowing the progress of the business down. So when she realized that, she was like, oh my goodness, I need to actually get someone in to do the detail so then I can spend more time actually visioning and putting some of those visions into practice to grow the business. And once she did that, not only did she feel so much better, she was so much more in her joy and excitement for the business. It started to catapult even quicker because she wasn't wasting her time and energy doing things that she was not competent in, right? Super important that we start to consider this. Now, there's one last little piece here that I want you to consider when it comes to the progress of your business. So where do you want to take it? Because the more that we can start to map out our team, right? Because it's like when you look at all of these tasks, who do you need on your team? In order for you to be more in your zone of genius, who do you need on your team in order to take some of those tasks off your list? And it might be just mapping out what your next hire is going to be, and then the next hire and the next hire. And it's not something that you may necessarily do today, but if you map that out, not only are you activating your reticular activating system, which is going to support attraction and manifestation into your life, it's going to help you be open to that concept that, hang on a minute, I am actually holding myself back by being in my zone of genius, trying to do all of the things, wear all of the hats and do everything myself, when really, if I develop a really strong team that's going to support the growth of my business, I will get to that big vision business quicker. Okay, I cannot wait to hear. If there's any questions or thoughts that you have, jump into the Voxer group and share with me. If you're struggling to find your zone of genius, I will help you by talking it out, bring it up on one of the live calls, and let's actually map it out. And I cannot wait to see what you decide to automate, delegate, or outsource.